Hello, everybody. This is Catholic Dad back again. I haven't been for 3 weeks making videos or something like that. What happened in the interim was one of my sons got a First Holy Communion, another son got married, and there's been several other things going on. Catholic Dad Studios, where I record, has been dismantled because we needed the tabletops for parties and stuff like that. So I'm back, and I've had a lot of time to think, or very little time to think. Today, the title is "What's Wrong with Black Lives Matter." Here's the problem with Black Lives Matter movement. Okay, you ready for this? Everybody's going to be all upset. Woo! Well, just listen to me and hear me out, and don't get your panties in a bunch, because there is something intrinsically wrong with the name of the movement, and this is what it is. How many people on planet Earth agree that Black Lives Matter? Well, pretty much everybody. I would say 99.95% of people on planet Earth today believe that Black Lives Matter, and very few people would disagree with this point. I would say maybe half a percentage point. I don't know what it is. But the fact of the matter is, most people on planet Earth believe this. I mean, it's way higher percentage today than it was, say, I don't know, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago. Maybe that's proof that we're moving in a very good direction. But what's the problem with Black Lives Matter movement? Like, it's all the movement's founded on this, that there's too much police violence against black people in the inner city, and that the police are too violent, and therefore we have to rise up against the authority of the police state in America. Yeah, I could kind of agree with that. A lot of people can agree with that. But what did they do? So they've taken the name of their group, Black Lives Matter, which is they've made a statement that nobody can disagree with, right? But then they attached a whole bunch of different other political agendas to the statement of Black Lives Matter, which a lot of people disagree with, right? And so what you do is, when you make a statement, when your name is something that nobody can disagree with, but then you attach agenda items to it, which are lightly put, Marxist in nature: anti-family, anti-Christianity, anti-Western civilization, they're a Marxist agenda for the most part. And you just got to go on their website. They talk about, the Western nuclear family is kind of tyrannical. They talk about like heterosexuality is tyrannical. They want to open up the world for cisgender people, which I don't even know what that means, frankly. So they want to take down the family. They want to take down Christianity. They want to take down what the white male privilege is. But then they make a name of Black Lives Matter. And so here's the deal. So are you going to argue with somebody who says Black Lives Matter? No, because you agree with the statement. But then they attach all this Marxist ideology onto them, right? And then you can't argue with them anymore. You can't actually even discuss transgenderism, homosexuality, the breakdown of the family, all the things that may be giving culture its major problem, the stuff that they're trying to promote. They're attaching to a name that you can't disagree with. And what does that do? That wrecks the channels of diplomacy, because if you want to discuss things with people, and you want to be open with people, and you want to share ideas, and you want to say, hey, well, I disagree with your take on family foundation and the nuclear family. And they'll say, Black Lives Matter, rah! And they'll start screaming and yelling. That's a problem, because then you can't have diplomacy anymore. And one of the great things that Western civilization has brought to the world, which a lot of people disagree with this statement, but you just have to read a little bit of history to find out. Diplomacy is something that kind of flowed out of Western civilization. And if you take down the diplomacy, the only thing you're left with is war, anger, frustration, right? Diplomacy is very important. You should never, ever, ever attach agenda items to a name that's so racially based, because you'll destroy all forms of diplomacy. Now, what happens when you destroy forms of diplomacy? You get anger, frustration, and people do one of two things, right? They either fight, or they turn around and run. And you're going to see what's going to happen in this nation. And I don't want to be a great predictor of this, but right now everybody's turning around and running. They're like, well, we're not going to do anything about this. We're not going to do anything about this. That's not what we're all about. We're not going to be bigots. We're not going to. And right now, these people in the Black Lives Matters movement, what are they? They're destroying private property, burning buildings, taking down monuments, trying to erase history. This is all neo-Marxism. It's modernism. It's everything that is wrong with the world in this one movement tied all together. And it's not about police brutality anymore. But the problem is, the whole world is turned around and run, right? Until it doesn't. And this is, I think this is probably the big warning to the Black Lives Matter Marxist movement, is you're not going to win this battle. It's kind of You're swatting a hornet's nest. You know you're doing it. Burning and destroying property, trying to take on authoritative structures, trying to replace it with your own authoritative structure, which never works, right? It only leads to anarchy, chaos, and the domination of your fellow man. And if the last 100+ years of human history hasn't proven itself, anytime that progressive modernist neo-Marxist movements when they grind up their fellow man in meat grinders, in the body counts not in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, but it's in the millions and hundreds of millions. And so, but here's the problem: America. What's the difference between America and all the other countries where the neo-Marxists and the Marxist movements rose up and were able to win and oppress the people with like 100 years of Cold War? The difference is America is exquisitely well armed. And so when the communists step up and they're going to try to take over the reins of government and they're going to try to take over the cities, the rest of the country won't allow it, and you will lose. You're going to lose in a big way. But the problem is that makes revolution. It makes it makes conflict. If you are creating a movement based upon with a racial name that nobody can disagree with, but then all sorts of agenda items which everybody disagrees with, you separate people, you divide them. You don't open the reins of communication. There's no diplomacy, and you inevitably will lead to death and destruction. And I think that's the whole point of the whole movement, frankly. That's what Marxism does. It wants to take down the authoritative structure of government so it can seize the reins of power and it can institute its own authoritative structure. The problem is it's never good at it, and it only leads to more and more and more increasingly dead body counts, And so I guess that's all I want to say today. The problem with the Black Lives Matter movement, and by the way, if you doubt what I say about it being neo-Marxist, just look at their website. It's clear and unambiguous. Oh, by the way, there's charters in every single city. There's charters across the world, which means it has an international backing, which means it's Marxist from its very beginnings. Who knows, Soros or all the other big money people, even the Clinton Foundation is probably a part of this, and Barack Obama, I would suspect so. And so, by the way, if you're part of the BLM movement and you kind of realize that you're swatting a hornet's nest and you're making people mad and angry, and you're mad and angry yourself, just think what's going to come eventually. And this is one of my predictions, by the way, and it's going to be really. It's not what I want to happen. I think it's probably going to happen. And I'm putting it on paper, by the way, or in a video, just so if it does happen, I can say, see, I told you so. I was pretty right on the corona thing the whole time, too. But this is what's going to happen. Trump will win the election because what you people don't realize in the Black Lives Matter movement is you are reassuring his reelection. I mean, it's guaranteed because of what you're doing. It doesn't matter what the economy does at this point in time. People are disgusted with like taking down our history, destroying property, violence, everything else, using violence to get your way. People don't like that, and Trump will be elected. Well, what's going to happen then? The cities will explode. They're going to erupt in violence, chaos, burning buildings, property destruction like you're doing right now. But it's going to be, say, 100 times worse, 100-fold worse. And these cities are going to start spilling into the suburbia. And at that point in time, it's going to turn into not a police action because the police won't be able to handle it. It's going to be a military action. I suspect that is probably true, and I don't think most people will shirk their duty from protecting their communities. And it will be game on, and you will lose because the military won't be on your side either, but the people who live in those communities won't be on your side either. And so you're assuring A, Trump gets elected, but B, assuring your destruction through violent force. This would work in, say, France, Germany, or countries that people aren't well armed, or Great Britain. You guys could take over the European nations. You always do, right? I mean, Europe kind of sucks that way. Every time communism rises in Europe, everybody folds because they're so weak and pathetic. They can't step up and say no. But in America, that's not the case, and it's going to be probably a bloody dogfight. I'm not looking forward to it, but I think it's probably what's going to happen. And so, well, anyway, and again, if you guys ever have a movement like pro-life movement, right? Don't attach all sorts of other, agenda items to the pro-life movement, because then you smear the pro-life movement. Much like Black Lives Matter, if you say, hey, we just want less police violence, stick to that issue. Don't start throwing neo-Marxism at us because nobody's going to agree with you. Oh, and by the way, I do have one more prediction. If this does become a complete racial divide, like it looks like it's becoming, the other thing you're going to assure for yourself is something called apartheid, because people are, once they turn around and run, they're not going to want to come back and, diversify like we kind of have done. We were the great melting pot in this nation, and people, there's going to be, I think, pockets of different racially oriented people based upon who they feel most comfortable living with. And the Black Lives Matter movement is almost reassuring the spreading of apartheid, or some kind of segregation, because people are not going to tolerate undue violence, wanton violence, or just destruction of private property. They're not going to do it, and they're going to step up and start separating themselves out in communities. They might start building fences. Who knows? They might stop sending police into certain areas, and then those neighborhoods are going to go to pot. Well, anyway, this is Catholic Dad making you think about it. Please like or subscribe, get the Mass, and pray the Daily Rosary. God bless you all.